Hello. So, welcome to our next lesson. Let's go over what our lesson objective is for today's lesson. So, today we will identify different types of investigations. All right. So, we're going to identify different types of investigations. Let's go on to our vocabulary. So, our first vocabulary word is investigation. So, an investigation is a procedure carried out to carefully observe, study, or test something in order to learn more about it. So that's what we want to do in investigations. We want to learn more about something. Okay, now let's go on to what is an experiment? Maybe you've heard of this before. And an experiment is an investigation in which all of the conditions are controlled. So that means we're going to be really careful about what we change and what we don't. So we want to make sure that we have control of all of the different components of our experiment. All right. And a model. So models are used to represent how something works or looks like that can't be seen. So for example, we have a model right here of the solar system. We can't really go out and see the solar system, right? Because it's just too big and we're not able to go out into space. So we created a model to show the solar system and to make some observations about it. All right. Now, our last vocabulary word for this unit or for this lesson is observational testing. So, observational testing is a study in which the scientist simply observes the subject without interfering. So, we're just going to watch something and see what happens. We're not going to do anything. We're not going to mess with it. We're not going to experiment. We're just going to watch and see what happens. Like our scientist over here is observing our penguin. So she's doing some observational testing. She's just observing the penguin without really messing with it or setting up any experiments. All right. So now that we went through all of our vocabulary, let's go through when and why do we use these types of investigations. So our three types of investigations are experiments, models, and observational testing. So let's first go through our experiments. Maybe you've talked about experiments before in previous classes, but why do we use an experiment? So an experiment is a procedure used to test a statement that can be tested and can explain what happens in the investigation. So a procedure is used to test a hypothesis. A hypothesis is going to be our question that we can test and we can explain. So that's what we use experiments for. Experiments are used to answer questions and to answer hypotheses. All right. Now, let's go on to a model. So what do we use models for? So scientists use models when we can't experiment with the real thing. We use models. So for example, if we are trying to figure out how earthquakes affect buildings, we can't really create an earthquake to kind of see how that building is affected, right? So we're going to use a model to help represent that earthquake. So we can't really set up an experiment, so we have to use a model to see what happens. Okay. And last but not least is going to be observational testing. When do we use observational testing? So we use observational testing when something is too big, too far away, or too uncontrollable for experiments. So for example, with our solar system, it's too far away, right? So we can't really do an experiment or answer any questions by doing an experiment on our solar system, right? Or another example may be if we are making some observations, we want to answer some questions about some wild animals, right? Maybe we want to know how their lifespan works. So we're going to make some observational testing because it's going to be too big to do experiments for their whole lives, right? And we're not going to be able to answer our questions. So that's when we use observational testing, when something is too big, too far away, or too uncontrollable for experiments. All right. Okay, so let's go over what our lesson objective was for today. So today's lesson objective was that today we identified different types of investigations, and we absolutely did that. So Up next, make sure to do all of your lesson activities. Make sure to follow your learning map and have a great time learning. I'm excited to see all the fun things that you've learned. Bye. Have a great day.